Spring storms are here as the heat continues to build in a much more active subtropical jet stream. Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Cinco de Mayo out there. We've got a lot to cover, and let's start off with the water vapor imagery this morning. We've got a trough hanging out into the Pacific Northwest. That's actually bringing a lot more cooler conditions for them, but we have a very active subtropical jet stream to the south. We've got southwest winds, southwest flow aloft. That creases the moisture content, and the heat continues to build, and we'll be seeing some record high temperatures across the southern plains today, especially in the heat of the afternoon. Let's take a look at those temperatures for today. So we've got the trough out west. It's bringing all the cooler conditions. Highs are only in the 50s for them, but it's completely the opposite once you get into the middle of the country, especially down here in Texas, where they're going to be seeing their hottest temperatures of the year so far. Dallas-Fort Worth could actually hit 96. That would be a record-breaking temperature. You can see all the warmer conditions filtering along the deep south there, but all those warmer areas going to be continue to lift further and further north as we get into the deeper into the weekend, especially headed into next week. And we've got a lot of moisture going to be feeding into those storms as well. So we saw some storms yesterday, even a couple tornado warnings further along the Red River area. But man, those first time ever we've seen dew points rise so far into the 70s all the way to the Oklahoma border. So that's going to be the fuel to increase this instability later on this afternoon. These are late afternoon into the early evening type setup events. So it's typically drier in the mornings, and then as you heat up the atmosphere along the dry line, storms start to explode, and then you have leftover outflow boundaries. That's what happened yesterday. There were storms coming out of Oklahoma that left an outflow boundary right along the Red River, and that was the activation point that triggered all the supercell thunderstorms to develop right along that outflow boundary and then dive southeastward, and had some big hail there west of the Sanger area last night towards Denton. But yes, here's the setup for today. So we've got two areas of instability. So we got the dry line out west. We do have a strong capping inversion across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Further south, you don't. I do feel you're going to be able to break the cap later on this afternoon. So we could be seeing some big time supercell thunderstorms. These are large hail producers down there in the Waco region, down there in the Stephenville area. And further north, we also have another boundary draped across portions of Nebraska. They also could see some big time hail producers later on this afternoon. And don't let your guard down all the way down into New Orleans, because those could be on the strong side as well, especially, again, these are late afternoon. We're probably talking around after 5 o'clock this afternoon, going into the early evening time frame, and then kind of dying off as you get into the 10, 11, kind of 12 o'clock midnight time frame. So here's the overall rain producers for the next 24 hours. So again, you've got that trough that's going to be inundating the Pacific Northwest with some light to moderate rain for them. You also have that another boundary that's setting up across portions of Nebraska into Iowa as well as into Wisconsin with a good ½ inch to maybe some 1 to 2 inch totals in some of those stronger thunderstorms. Yes, further south, greater probability of breaking the capping inversion down there into central Texas, just southwest of the DFW Metroplex, and then heavier rains draped across portions of Mobile down there towards New Orleans. And then you also have another pocket of instability around portions of Tennessee as well. So if you do like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel, and I do report pretty much on a daily basis across the country. And here's the setup for Saturday. So you've got, again, we've been talking about this trough that's been impacting a good part of the Great Lakes for the good part of the week, brought all the snows and portions of the Great Lakes regions. That has continued to move further and further off to the East Coast. And then now, by the time we head into your Saturday going into Sunday afternoon, that trough is mainly going to be pushing offshore, and the heat will start building in. So Yes, the heat builds from the south to the north. We've got a ridge over the top of Canada, and then there's that trough that's hanging out into the Pacific Northwest with all those cooler conditions for them. But here's the setup for Saturday. So again, it's the dry line type setup. You've got the warm front lifting a little bit further north. So now areas more like into St. Louis, getting into portions of central and northern Illinois will be under the gun for severe storms. Again, big time hail producers. I do feel even the southern branches are likely going to be upgraded to at least a slight risk, because this whole area will get activated along the dry line, heat up in the heat of the afternoon, and then form out west and then shift further eastward as we get deeper into the evening time frame. So definitely be on high alert up there into portions of central and northern Missouri there, and especially into Illinois as we get into your Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening time frame. So overall, for the next 48 hours, here's your rainfall estimate. So across the northern branch, you're going to again have these spokes of energy that's going to be traversing across the northern tier, and this boundary will be setting up across portions of Nebraska, getting into Wisconsin, and then bringing some heavier rains in portions of the Dakotas. And then we'll have the dry line setting up across portions of Texas, setting up along West Texas, and then going into as they shift further east with the higher rain probabilities right there along, say, the Waco region into central Texas, and then the heavier probabilities down there into New Orleans area, as well as into the Mobile portions of the Florida Panhandle, will be getting that heavier rain. So yes, as we go into that Sunday time frame, you can see the mechanisms that we're working with. We've got a series of vorticities that are draped across the northern branch that are bringing all the unsettled weather across the north central states and northern states. And then we have the southwest winds that are draped across, coming in off that much more active subtropical jet stream down here into the Pacific. That's going to be draped across and pulling in, taking advantage of all that daytime heating. And that's going to be trigger for more thunderstorms. And again, at the heat of the afternoon, a lot of these areas are going to have increased CAPE values. Some of these are going to be on the more or less the extreme side. So there's a lot of fuel to fuel these thunderstorms. These are, more or less isolated in nature. Not everybody gets it on a daily basis, but if you are under one of those supercells, yes, you do have the capability of bringing those big time hail producer thunderstorms. We've seen that numerous setup. And again, I think that's going to be unfolding across a good part of the southern plains, and that by the time we head into Sunday, that's going to be lifting even further north into northern Illinois, even in portions of Wisconsin, because there's the setup on the Storm Prediction Center by the time we head into Sunday. Again, I feel like this is all areas that are going to be upgraded to at least a slight risk for this time of year. Again, right along the dry line, you probably have a greater probability of seeing rainfall across North Texas with this particular setup on your Sunday time frame, and then heading into Oklahoma, and then again where the warm front lifts further north. That's going to put even portions of southern Wisconsin, even probably portions of central Wisconsin into play with that severe weather. So this whole area is going to be lit up on an isolated basis in the heat of the afternoon after probably the 5 o'clock time frame, going into that early evening, and then kind of dying off as we get into that midnight time frame. But you can see on the big picture on the North American view, there's just more active subtropical jet. Even heading into the next week, this pattern just continues with spokes of energy coming inland across the Pacific Northwest that traverses across a good part of Montana, headed in through the Dakotas. And then we've got that persistent southwest flow that'll bring all the instability and the increased water vapor that's going to be accessed into this area. The dew points are going to be well into the 60s and 70s across this region. And this boundary is going to be lifting further north all the way up to Wisconsin and to Michigan by then. So this puts this whole area from Michigan, from Wisconsin to Michigan, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, essentially, from the central and eastern 2/3, going to be at a kind of more or less soupy type air mass and all the unsettled light conditions, because there's a lot of heat to work with. So these are some of the hottest temperatures we've seen so far this season. and the 90s just continue to be in play, especially out there further in West Texas where they are on the more the drier side. But you can definitely see the 80s lifting further north as we get into next week, with the 80s reaching all the way up into northern Illinois. That's going to be putting them more in play and putting them then into the more moisture laden content type atmosphere. Because yes, going into that Monday, Tuesday timeframe, the setup basically traverses across the central and eastern 2/3, puts all the areas into the deep south, into the southeast, going up into the Ohio Valley, pushing into portions of West Virginia, through the Carolinas, into that rainy type more atmosphere. And that, again, the precipitable water content is going to be pretty high, and this is already your kind of your wetter times of the year for the month of May. And you're seeing water latent contents again sometimes approaching 1 to 2 inches per hour. So if you happen to be under one of those supercells or one of those that instability, yes, it could wring out like a sponge, because there's going to be definitely a lot of moisture going to be associated with these thunderstorms, heading into next week. So the breakdown, I don't see any like widespread severe outbreak on any given day, but there's definitely going to be pockets of instability where you're going to have an increased probability of big time hail producers and stronger winds. So I think even these areas will definitely even possibly get upgraded. This could be upgraded to at least possibly an enhanced risk as we get closer to this event. But here's your bullseye heading into your Sunday afternoon for Iowa, getting into northern Illinois. And again, I think it puts more into Wisconsin into play with these supercells. They heat up in the heat of the afternoon, and then right again on Monday you're going to be draped across that boundary, across portions of Missouri, back into St. Louis area again, into Illinois, back into Indiana, and then further south you've got instability across portions of Oklahoma and Arkansas. And then again, the dry line just sets up again for next week. I think we transition as we get deeper into that, say, 10th time frame to more of a, I guess, more widespread rain, and I guess just a more latent widespread rain activity. So the next several days are going to be more or less isolated to scattered, and then the setup going into next week, especially after we get after the 10th time frame, going to especially next Friday, you're going to be seeing a lot of moisture coming in from a steady stream of moisture draped across a good part of Texas, Oklahoma, through Kansas, all the way to Nebraska, through the Dakotas, all the way to Canada, guys. We're going to have a pretty active low-level jet that's going to be moving in, and it's going to be slowing down. So this is going to be hanging around for several days, sending spokes and spokes of energy, and that's going to bring all the unsettled weather across a good part of Texas and well as Oklahoma. So we're going to be seeing some pretty high water content values down here, and some heavier rains and more widespread rains. We'll probably, instead of looking at 30-40% chances of probability, you're likely into the 60 to 70% chances on a daily basis, from that 11th, 12th, 13th type time frame, going into late next week. So yes, even the Climate Prediction Center is on board with this, with draped across a good part of the southern plains, all of Texas, Oklahoma, into Missouri, back into Arkansas, into Louisiana, heading into Mississippi, western Tennessee. This whole area should see heavier rainfall, especially as we get into late next week, going into next weekend, with a much more widespread event. Because here's the latest European ensembles for the next 10 days. Again, you're going to have that draped, these spokes and spokes of energy that are going to be traversing across the northern branch to send out all the heavier rains. And then you got the southwest flow, and the persistent rains are going to be draped across a good part of the southern plains, with all those heavier rains that will lift further north, extending, getting into Wisconsin, Michigan, going into the Ohio Valley, and then lighter amounts as you get towards the northeast and draped across the Carolinas into Florida. And the GFS ensembles pretty much have the same thing, with the the areas of the most unsettled conditions, especially as we head into next week, and then the the isolated nature, and then the much more widespread nature as we go into late next week across a good part of the southern plains. And then you have that northern tier as well that you have to be concerned about for daily storm activity for up there. So definitely a lot of much more active unsettled weather for May as we transition into a much more favorable type pattern for daily severe storms and heavier rainfall. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.